Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Phil and I'm a senior lecturer in astrophysics at the University of Lincoln. I'm also a planetary scientist, so my area of research really is planets, moons, rings, that sort of thing. And I usually do kind of more educational videos on how planets form, different sorts of moons, that sort of stuff. But I did one on the chocolates of the solar system, so I came across a chocolate set that was all the planets, all have different flavors and textures, and I quite enjoyed that. I really love food as well as space, so I want to combine the two things, and I've come across some other chocolates. I've got a range of different flavors, hopefully different textures as well, and this time round I'm going to try and match that to the different diversity of moons in the solar system. So there are various different sorts of moons in the solar system. Some have hidden oceans, some have volcanoes, some are completely solid, some potentially might have metallic cores, magnetic fields, atmospheres. There's a whole range of moons. So I've got this selection of chocolates here. I've got 9 of them, all different flavors, hopefully different textures inside as well. Don't really know, haven't actually tried them yet. And I'm going to match those to some of the moons in the solar system. Which ones would these represent if I could assign it to a moon? So the first one that I'm actually going to do is Io. So Io is a volcanic moon and it's around Jupiter. It's the closest Galilean moon to Jupiter. It has molten lava volcanoes, has a molten interior. It's quite intense. It's actually the most volcanic object or body in the solar system. So what I've got here is I've got a Baileys and coffee chocolate. Now I've gone for that one, but well, I should say I've matched the two together because coffee is quite an intense flavour. That's going to represent kind of the intense activity going on with Io due to the gravitational interaction with Jupiter. But also the Baileys can represent the molten inside. Hopefully, I don't know what the texture is going to be like, but even if it's not and it's completely solid, then the Baileys itself on its own can represent that moltenness inside, and the coffee represents kind of the intense, complex nature of the volcanic activity. And also, actually, depending on where coffee is grown on Earth, you get a very different flavour as well. So that you typically find that coffee is grown in volcanic regions is what gives it its unique flavour. So this is Baileys and coffee. I'm going to assign that to Io, Jupiter's most innermost Galilean moon. Shall we actually have a look and see how it tastes and what it's like inside? So as expected, actually, see that? So it's nice and soft inside to represent that molten interior. The flavour's quite strong, quite intense from that coffee. So again, for me, that seems to match Io quite well. Most volcanic place in the solar system, it's going to have a molten inside below its kind of hard surface with the volcanic activity on top. For my next chocolate and moon, I'm going to go a bit smaller. This time round, it's not going to be a kind of more spherical type moon. It's going to be more irregular shape, more like a potato, I suppose. And this is going to be Phobos around Mars, a fairly small moon. And the chocolate I've gone for with this one is black sesame. So this one here. So it's going to be kind of, hopefully, or I should say dark sesame, black sesame. It's one of the two, I can't quite remember. So I'm expecting it to kind of be like quite a solid dark chocolate flavoured with sesame. Why have I gone for that? Well, Phobos is hard. It has a cratered surface. So that kind of might mimic the fairly hard, dark chocolate texture that you would get. And then the earthy notes that come through from the sesame could represent the more rocky nature to that. It's predominantly rock. It's a fairly hard moon. It's a regular sort of shape. It doesn't necessarily match this, but the earthy notes from the sesame and then this intense kind of stronger flavours from the dark chocolate, and the texture of the dark chocolate more represents the rocky nature for Phobos. So let's kind of see what this one's like inside. The previous one was quite soft, but that was a molten volcanic one, and that worked quite well. So it is relatively soft in the middle, but it's got a very unique kind of earthy flavour. I think that kind of works quite well. And interestingly, along the base here, Let's see if we can get it to, there we go. It's got a really hard, kind of crispy, crunchy, dark chocolate base. Again, that's, for me, represents that kind of hard, cratered, more rugged surface of phobos that we get with that. It's not like it's not soft. So the soft inside, not necessarily, but at least the flavour from that soft interior, from the sesame seed, works quite well. Now my next moon is going larger again. We're going for Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon. This actually has one of the most significant atmospheres of a moon in the solar system. Its atmosphere is predominantly nitrogen and methane. Now methane is quite volatile. It's not particularly, it doesn't have a flavour, it doesn't necessarily have an odour. But what I've done here is I've gone for a tangy mango one. I'm quite excited about this one. Quite like mango. I'm interested to see what this one's going to be like. Now, why have I gone for a tangy mango for this? Again, you've got that methane there, the hydrocarbons in the atmosphere. They're volatile. But whilst they don't necessarily have a flavour themselves, that can represent the tanginess in this chocolate here. So it's got a very thick atmosphere. And again, mango-wise, also say colour-wise of mango, represents the orange hue that this atmosphere has around this large Saturnian moon. So should we have a look kind of what this tastes like, what it's like inside, to see how it kind of matches up to what I'm expecting. So there we go. Very well matches that orange hue we have in the atmosphere of Titan. And that has got a real tang to it. So that, for me, represents the really volatile methane that we have in the atmosphere. And also Titan's one of the moons where we could potentially support life as well. It's very cold, much colder than here on Earth, but there are organisms that could potentially survive in that environment with those sorts of hydrocarbons as well. But the tanginess and the colour of that tangy mango chocolate, for me, work quite well for this moon Titan. Now, my next moon has a bit of a hidden secret, actually. So this is one of Saturn's moons again. This is called Mimas, and it has a solid kind of cratered surface, but it also potentially has a subsurface ocean. So it kind of hides a bit of surprise there. Now, the chocolate I've gone for with this one is a banana caramel. So what I'm expecting here is kind of a hard dark chocolate outer casing, which would represent that hard crust of Mimas. It's not particularly active or anything like that. It has this kind of hard rocky surface, but we think it's got an ocean underneath that surface, because actually we could do certain things by looking at how it rocks back and forth. I've done a separate video on that if you want to check that out, on how we actually think it has an ocean. Now, the banana flavour could potentially represent that kind of hidden surprise underneath. Whilst the surface is barren, cold, and lifeless, we could have something kind of inside where we could support life, and that could be represented by this kind of sweet, quite soft, banana-like flavour. And of course, though, I'm expecting it to be kind of soft inside as well, because we've got a hard surface, hard crust from the dark chocolate. Below that, we may have a more softer, caramel-like, kind of sweet, smooth flavour there, which could represent that kind of hidden ocean. Now, other moons do have, or potentially have, hidden oceans as well, which we might mention as we go through the other moons as well. So let's see how this kind of stacks up to the moon Mimas. So yeah, we were right. We've got that hard, dark chocolate surface around the outside, representing the hard surface of the moon. We've then kind of got that really strong banana sweet flavour below, which could represent the subsurface ocean, which potentially could support life. We don't know that. We haven't sampled it, but we do know there's kind of a liquid ocean underneath, or we highly suspect that's the case. That could be represented by this soft banana caramel inside that hard chocolate casing. So my next moon has a similar element to the previous one, Mimas. It has a subsurface ocean. This is Europa, and this is one of Jupiter's Galilean moons. It's another big moon. It has a frozen surface, and a potentially fairly significant liquid ocean underneath that solid frozen surface. Now, the chocolate I've gone for this one is black currant cheesecake. So you see that? Now, why have I gone for that? Well, cheesecake is quite smooth in texture, even on the surface, and Europa has a fairly smooth surface. Because it's frozen ice and it's kind of active as well, so it has kind of like these geysers throwing out kind of frozen water ice. It kind of gets replenished fairly regularly, so it doesn't have a lot of craters like some of the other moons. It's a fairly smooth surface there, a bit like a cheesecake. So that's why I've gone for that. And the blackcurrant adds a real tanginess, a bit like the tangy mango one, and that's going to represent the complex chemistry underneath the surface. So in the ocean, we have been able to sample what it's made of. It's got quite a complex chemistry there, which could potentially support life. It's got hydrothermal vents underneath as well. So we expect Europa to be one of the moons in our solar system that could potentially support life. So that tanginess represents that complex chemical makeup of that ocean. And again, cheesecake is quite smooth, so I'd expect a kind of fairly smooth interior to this chocolate, and then the outside would be fairly hard but smooth as well. So kind of like a soft, smooth inside, but a hard, crunchy outer casing is what I also expect from this. So let's kind of see how Europa stacks up. So there we go. In fact, if you have a look at the outside of that, you've got a white chocolate casing that perfectly matches that icy surface. Smooth, but also colour-wise, and it doesn't have those strong, earthy flavours that a dark chocolate would have because it's not rocky. So that's that works really well. We've got that smooth tanginess inside to represent the complex chemistry going off there, and then we've got this crispy base as well, which could also represent kind of the crispy, icy surface as well. So again, another one that I think works quite well. Blackcurrant cheesecake, Europa. Now, my next moon is pretty much the same as Europa, actually, but it's around Saturn. This is Enceladus. So Enceladus is an icy moon. Again, orbits around Saturn, has a icy surface, has a liquid ocean underneath that frozen surface, fairly significant one. It also has kind of thermal vents underneath. And again, another good place to look for life, where life might be able to survive in the solar system, just like Europa. And what I've gone for here is apple pie. Why have I gone for apple pie? Well, apple pie, you've kind of got that crunchy base, or the crunchy top as well, actually. It's a pie, and that can represent the icy surface that it's got there. Also, the filling of an apple pie. You've got that cinnamon feeling, which gives you kind of a warm sensation. That can represent those thermal vents as well. And then also on top of the apple pie, you can have like these kind of cracks, which can represent the tiger stripes that we have on Enceladus as well, which is to do with the tidal interaction with Saturn. It pulls it and stretches it, squeezes it, and that icy surface kind of has cracks in, and that could represent kind of the cracked and rugged surface of an apple pie. So again, I'd expect a kind of soft inside to this, a fairly warm apple cinnamon filling to represent the potentially warm liquid ocean and the thermal vents inside that could support life, and maybe a crispy base and a crispy outside or crunchy outside to represent that ice crust that we have, a bit like Europa as well. So let's kind of see what this one's like inside. So yeah, perfect really. We've got that warm apple cinnamon filling, perfectly represents the liquid ocean, the thermal vents that maybe could support life. We've got that kind of white chocolate outer casing as well. Again, represents the icy crust that we have. And also we've got a crusty base, not crusty, but a crispy base, which can represent, again, the crunchy, icy surface of the actual moon itself. So again, another one which I think matches quite well to the moon itself. Now the next moon is going back to Jupiter again. So now we've got Callisto, which is another Galilean moon of Jupiter. It's a fairly rocky moon, has a rugged sort of surface, rocky. So again, we're going back to those kind of strong earthy flavours, dark chocolate, and it might have a kind of soft inside, a more molten inside, or even a subsurface ocean, but we're not entirely confident about that. So this time around, I've gone for brownie, because if you've had a brownie, I'm sure you have, we kind of have that rugged surface on it, the cracked surface, which can represent the cratered up surface, the rocky, uneven surface that it might have. But also, at the very centre of your brownie is going to be a little bit gooey, a little bit soft. And that can represent the fact that we might suspect that it's got a softer inside, a subsurface ocean, or even slightly molten. It's a fairly large moon, so we're not quite confident on that. And brownies are not particularly liquid, so that kind of represents that part there. But we've got the dark chocolate in the brownie, which again represents the earthiness of the rocky surface. So that kind of, for me, works quite well. So we'll have a look and see what the one is like inside. So there we go. That tastes just like brownie. Very gooey inside, actually. I'm not entirely sure that Callisto would be this particularly gooey or soft inside, but it's got a really strong, intense, dark chocolate flavour, which for me works well due to the fact that it's a very rocky surface. Brownies, not necessarily this particular chocolate here, but brownies in general have that kind of cracked surface, the uneven, rugged nature. Again, that lines up well with the surface of Callisto, and the softness inside represents the fact that it may have this subsurface ocean, although we're not that confident on that at the moment. Now, for the next moon, again, we're going straight back to Saturn again, because Jupiter and Saturn actually have the most moons, and obviously the largest ones as well. I'm going to go for Dione this time. Now, this one here is kind of a two-tone moon. It has a dark hemisphere and a light hemisphere, and it's tidally locked, which means that one side always faces towards Saturn as it orbits around. It's like our moon. As it goes around the Earth, you always see one side. It's always facing towards us because it's tidally locked. A lot of moons are like that, and Dione is no exception. Now, the reason why it's two-tone is the leading face is traveling forward through space, and that gets hit more by objects. It's more cratered. It makes it dark. It basically collects space debris. And on the opposite side is quite light. And the reason for that is it collects icy material from the E-ring. Now, the E-ring is created by Enceladus, one of Saturn's other moons that we did a short chocolate tasting of previously, and it's throwing out ice particles into space, which then create this ring. Dione then moves in the ring, it collects it, and that makes the back half of it kind of lighter. It's icy. So we've got a dark side and a light side. And chocolate-wise, I've gone for a duo. So here we have this vanilla and strawberry. So I'm expecting a two-tone one inside, and that will represent the darker side and also the lighter side. Now, the two flavours, strawberries and vanilla, are not necessarily dark and light, but it will give us a two-tone. And the reason why I've gone for this flavour-wise is that Dione itself is a fairly calm moon. It's placid, so the flavours don't represent any kind of intense volcanic activity going off. Now, it did used to have some geological activity, which is still evident on its surface. However, right now, it's fairly calm and placid. So that's kind of why I've gone for fairly soft flavours. And yeah, basically it's two-tone, and hopefully the chocolate is as well. So let's kind of have a look inside and see how well this matches up. So there we go. We've got those two distinct layers there. We've got one hemisphere of the moon and the other have very different, not necessarily colours, but one's very dark, one's very light. So for me, that represents it quite well. I've squeezed it actually. And the flavours themselves represent kind of the calmness of the moon. Again, it's not intensely active like Io or Europa or Enceladus, which actually have these kind of volcanoes, either cryovolcanoes or more typical volcanoes. So again, another one for me that kind of matches up quite well. Now, the final moon I'm going to go for is Ganymede. Now this again is another Galilean moon of Jupiter. It's the largest moon in the solar system, and I've actually gone for whiskey caramel. So here we've got whiskey caramel chocolate. Now why have I gone for that? Well, whiskey is quite a complex flavour, and that represents the complex internal structure of Ganymede. So we think it might have a metallic core, a rocky mantle, an icy surface, even a subsurface ocean as well. So that really complex internal structure compared to some other moons can be represented by the complex flavour profile of whiskey. And then the caramel itself can represent the fact that it's likely going to have a subsurface ocean, so potentially soft some point inside. The whiskey gives us the complexity in the flavour. The caramel gives us the potential softer interior of this particular moon as well. So let's kind of have a look and see what this one's like inside and see how it matches up to my idea of Ganymede. So, very soft, very intense whiskey flavour. Great flavour though, but it's a lot more intense and complex than all of the other chocolates I've tried today. The only one that comes kind of close is the Baileys and coffee for Io, and that represented the volcanic activity of that moon, whereas the whiskey here is representing that complex internal structure of all the layering and stuff like that we have, that some of the other smaller moons just don't have. So again, another one for me that works quite well. So I hope you kind of enjoyed that unusual tour of some of the moons of the solar system. And if you did, let me know if there's anything else I can kind of do, any other chocolates, any other food that I can assign or think about with space or other objects in the solar system or even in space. You know, if there's any galaxies I could do, anything like that, any unusual, weird food that you've come across. I'd love to kind of give it a go because I really love food. Obviously, I love space as well, and combining the two is fantastic for me. So anyway, thank you for watching the video. I'll catch you later.